Okay, so today we are going to work on linear perspective. And with linear perspective, we use a vanishing point. It's a dot that horizontal edges seem to converge towards. We can draw with one dot or vanishing point. We can draw with two vanishing points, or we can draw with three vanishing points. And we're going to do a little bit of each of those in this demonstration before you can follow along. We start with a shape. So the shape I'm starting with is a square, and it doesn't have to be a square, it can be another shape. Well, let's do a circle. Okay, notice where I'm drawing and how small I'm drawing. There's plenty of room on the page for more drawing. We want to draw 1, 2, and 3-point perspective all on the same page. Then when we have a shape drawn and we want it to look 3D instead of 2D, we're going to use our ruler or a straight edge. It can be a straight edge of anything. Here's an Apple Pencil box, an old Apple Pencil box, and I could actually use that. Use that as a straight edge to start connecting my vanishing point to my shape. Okay, but I'm going to do that with a ruler. And I'm going to connect, or closely connect, I missed my dot a little bit, all of the corners of my square to my vanishing point that I can connect without drawing through my square. So I'm not going to connect this bottom right hand corner because it would force me to draw through my square, which would be fine if we were drawing a glass box or a clear plastic box, but we want to make our box look relatively solid. There we go. I'll do it like this so I can see my dot a little better. Okay, you have to take your time. Make sure that your ruler is on the corner and on the dot that you want to connect. Be careful with that. Okay, so now we have what looks like a box that maybe goes back in space forever until it disappears. We need to chop that off. Remember, this is review. So the back edges of a form are parallel to the front edges of a form in 2-point perspective. I'm sorry, in 1-point perspective. So here we've got a vertical line on the front left edge. I'm going to use a vertical line to create the back left edge of a side. Okay. Likewise, we've got a horizontal line for the top front edge of our box. So I want to use a horizontal line. Be careful with this one. It's easy to accidentally draw a line that's like this. Okay, we really need to flatten that guy out or it's going to look funny. Okay, so this is horizontal and that's horizontal. They're twins. All right, so now we can see all three sides of a box, and we could erase, or at least I will at least lighten the guidelines that I used so that we can better see the box without the vanishing point. But I don't want to erase them completely because I want you to see where those lines came from. There we go. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and shade a side in just to make it show up a little bit better on the page. Shade a couple sides in so that it's got a light side, the top, a medium side, the front, and a dark side, which is the side on the left that we can see. Using a one vanishing point with a curvy object is a little different. We're just using a circle, but it could be a realistic object that we're drawing. We doesn't have a corner. We have corners on our square that we know exactly where to draw with our ruler towards from the vanishing point. With a round object, not so much. So what we do instead is we put our ruler on our vanishing point, okay, and then swing that ruler towards a curve until it almost touches it or touches it, and then draw towards your object. There we go. See how I drew it purposely beyond the object a little bit. You can see how this line would touch its edge but not go into it. All right, it would actually pass it if I were to keep drawing. I'll do the same thing along the top. I'll put my pencil on my vanishing point to hold the ruler still, and then I can swing the ruler downward, in this case like a hinge, until it is right at another contour of my circle and draw my line. There we go. All right, doesn't look like much, but we're drawing a cylinder here. So like I copied the top horizontal edge of the cube to create the back horizontal edge, for my cylinder, I have a curved line. So I'll need to copy this curved line, kind of like a moon or a C shape, and put it in, somewhere between those guidelines. I can make my cylinder longer or shorter. I've chosen to make it the proportions that you see now. All right. And what we see happening with both of these forms is that they're becoming smaller as they get closer to the vanishing point, and that means they're becoming smaller as they get farther away from us in space. All right, and that's a good thing because objects do get smaller as they move farther away from us in space. All right, now this part should have been review. We're supposed to do 1-point perspective in Art 1. Okay, and a lot of times we draw a cityscape or something like that, like you're looking right down a city street. Just so you know, I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel called Total Drawing that are a 1-point perspective cityscape. I also have 3D block letters on my YouTube channel, Total Drawing. So if you'd like to draw 3D block letters using one dot like this, then you can go there to learn a little bit more about how to do so. Okay, that's 1-point perspective, but we're going to go ahead and move on to 2-point perspective because that's really part of the curriculum in Drawing 1, which is a level 2 class. Okay, or I think it's called an intermediate level class nowadays. All right, so the big takeaway from 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective is with 1-point perspective we started with a shape, a square. With 2-point perspective, I'll need 2 dots first. So we're going to make our drawing inside of these 2 dots, and we're going to start with a line instead of a shape. All right, we'll call that one Vanishing Point 1, and I'll call this one Vanishing Point 2. Now that there's 2, we have to have a way to talk about them, right? So I'm going to draw slightly below these dots. If you want to, you could think about an imaginary line between these 2 dots as being your eye level. Okay, you may have heard that described as a horizon line before. Forget that. That's not true. Okay, sometimes it's true, but it's not always true. And a lot of art teachers teach perspective that way, that you draw a line, and they call it the horizon line, and then you put your dots on the horizon line. If you want to know more about why that's not always true, I'll be glad to tell you later on, but we're going to keep going with our drawing right now. So I'm going to start with a vertical line in this case, and I'm going to do it right here. Okay. So it's below my eye level by about an inch or a little less, and I guess this where my pencil's at is right between my vanishing points. So I've drawn a vertical line a little bit to the left of that. Okay. Then, similar to the square we started with, we're going to connect some of our line to the vanishing points. Here we've got a little bit different. We've got 2 vanishing points to connect to instead of 1. And we don't have a corner, but we do have tips, right? We got the top and the bottom of our line, the tips of our line. So that's what I'm going to connect to both vanishing points now. Maybe I'll start using a slightly thinner or lighter line to do that so that it'll erase a little bit better. There we go. And I'll go ahead and connect the top and bottom of this vertical line that we started with to vanishing point number 2 as well. All right, there we go. So it doesn't look much like a box, but it will be, or a cube, a rectangular prism. We'll call it a rectangular prism in case its proportions are not a perfect cube, okay? Now, very similar to how we found the back edges of our cube here on the left, well, particularly on the left side of that cube, I had a vertical front edge, so I drew a vertical back edge to that left side. That's kind of what we're going to do here. And these 2 edges were twins, right? They're both vertical. Here we need a set of triplets, all right? And I've already got 1 vertical line, so I need 2 more on its right and left side to start to create sides of a box. And I'm going to make this not a cube, so I don't even have to try to get close to a cube. It's like a brick, All right, like the proportions of a brick. There we go. So it may not look like a box to you yet, but what we do have is a right and left side. Okay? Now, the magic of two-point perspective is about to happen. We need a top on this box. Okay? And I'll go ahead and tell you in two-point perspective, when you're drawing a box, and we can draw anything in two-point perspective, right? We can draw fancy cars, you know, that have a lot of curvy features. I promise you can draw anything in linear perspective, but we usually start with a box and then kind of carve other objects out of that box. So at least for the rectangular prism, or I'm going to say box because it's easier to say, for that part, we're at least drawing only three types of lines, okay? We can draw lines that are straight up and down, right? Just like my pencil, straight up and down, just like these three lines are straight up and down. We can also draw lines that go toward vanishing point number 1, and we can draw lines that go to vanishing point number 2. That's it, okay? So we need a top on here, and we know we have to either draw another vertical line, a line towards this dot, or a line towards that dot. That's our only choices. So let's think about what we're going to do here. We know we're going to be drawing on the top, so we're probably going to engage some of these top corners. Well, from this corner that I've got my pencil on, there's already a line that's straight up and down below that, right? We go down for that line. There's already a line that connects this corner to vanishing point number 2. That's done. So if we can only draw a line that does one of three things, we're left with only one choice. And that is to draw a line that goes towards vanishing point number 1. The magic of two-point perspective is it's going to draw the top of our box for us without us having to know where the back edges should be, or where the back corner of that top side should be. It's starting to look like a box now, isn't it? I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing from the top left corner of our box. I'm going to connect it to the only vanishing point it's not already connected to. And that's vanishing point number 2 right over here. All right, so here goes. Okay, there we go. That's done. And the magic of two-point perspective, ooh, I missed my dot by just a smidge, is that the box has a top now. It looks great. Looks like it's laying down, like it's a horizontal plane. And you'll notice, even with this small drawing, that this side of the top is a little smaller than this side, and that's because this portion is farther away from us. So linear perspective helps us to draw the rate at which objects appear smaller as they move away from us in space. All right, now I'm going to show you what three-point perspective is, and we'll draw one box in three-point perspective, and that's it, because that's not what our project is about, but I want you to know it's out there. Have you ever looked up at a building and it looked like it was getting smaller as you stared up at it? Well, that's what three-point perspective is for. So let me go ahead and draw down here 2 vanishing points, and we'll call them number 1 and number 2. The difference is we need a third dot, and I'm going to put that one way up here. Okay, so I know it looks like we're intruding on our other drawings a little bit, but that's okay. Well, the truth is we have to get our dots pretty spread out for three-point perspective. So I can really only draw a picture in this tiny little spot right here. All right, I can't draw close to those vanishing points. We don't start with a shape in three-point perspective, and we don't start with a vertical line in three-point perspective. To draw our box in the middle, we're only going to draw lines from one of these 3 dots. Actually, all 3 of these dots, but every single line will come from these dots. In order to make a cube, it takes 9 lines. All right, so there will be 3 from each dot. Don't believe me? Let's count them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so there's 9 lines in a cube, and we're going to give 3 of those lines to each of one of these 3 dots. Here we go. Since the third point is high on the page, that means we're going to draw a box as though we're looking up at it. All right, and I'm just going to start with a line from vanishing point number 3. It's not straight up and down on purpose because I want you to see that it doesn't have to be. All right, I'm going to go ahead and draw, just so you know, this line is like the center vertical line of a box. So I'm going to draw one on its left and one on its right, all from vanishing point number 3. and then we'll figure out what to do with those other dots. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to pick 2 spots on this middle line to draw towards from our vanishing points. Okay, so I'm going to pick this spot. You'll notice that spot, well, I don't want to make it a big fat dot, I'm sorry. I don't want it to look like a vanishing point. There we go, I'll just make it dark. I'll pick that spot. Notice it's well above my vanishing points. And I'll pick this spot. Okay, and that's going to be the entirety of my box. It's not really going to be much bigger than that. We will add a bottom to it right here. All right, now we'll use vanishing points 1 and 2 and draw a line to each of those spots that I've identified as what's going to be the top and bottom corner of my box. Okay, there's 2 of them. Let me do this one now. I know it doesn't look much like a box. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. All right. Remember, the vanishing points are directing me. I'm just following the rules of perspective and drawing towards those dots. All right, you might start to see this as a left side and a right side. Remember, we're looking up at this box now, so it won't have a top, it will have a bottom. Just as a reminder, the imaginary line that goes between vanishing points 1 and 2 represent our eye level. So anything above that, we're looking up at. Anything below this imaginary line, we're looking down at. In order to get the bottom on this box, we'll do the same thing to it that we did to our box here when we drew from vanishing points 1 and 2 to create the top, but we're going to do it on the bottom. So I've got an outside left corner and an outside right corner. Each of them is already connected to one vanishing point. They simply need to be connected to the opposite vanishing point. So I'll draw from the bottom left corner towards vanishing point number 2. Boom. And I'll draw from the bottom right corner to vanishing point number 1. Boom. All right, there it is. Now, the perspective is a little exaggerated. You know, it does get small really fast, as though it's real close to us, kind of. And especially down here, you know, when we get close to our vanishing points, the perspective becomes a little bit more extreme or exaggerated. All right, but hopefully you're seeing this as a rectangular prism in space. The parts that I'm darkening are the parts that count. Okay. Maybe if you've seen the old 1990s Star Trek show and you know who the Borg are, it kind of looks like their spaceship. Not a very exciting spaceship. They flew around space in a big cube. But in the show, they always showed it like this, from below, and it made it seem larger. And you know what? I'm going to move this line over a little bit, just for fun, because it's close to being a cube right now. It's just a little bit long on that side. So I'm going to redo those 2 corners, just tighten it up a little bit. There we go. So, you know, our drawings are manipulatable. In perspective, we can try something and move stuff around. There we go. So we've got, we'll just look at the boxes. Forget about that cylinder at the top of the page. So now we've got 3 boxes, all drawn with vanishing points, but in a different way. 1 point perspective has a side that is mostly facing us. 2 point perspective has a corner that's mostly facing us. And 3 point perspective has a corner that's facing us, but also takes into account how things get smaller as they go above our eyes or below our eyes. Okay, let me spin this around. Now you can see the same box as though we were looking down at it. Okay, and we could have been. Let me go make sure that's centered in there. There we go. Sure. So if your third dot is lower than the first 2, it'll look as though you're looking down on whatever your subject matter is. Okay, so those are the 3 types of perspective. Okay, but if you need to learn more about this one, 1 point perspective, I guess I should label these. Then go to my YouTube channel and watch the videos about 1 point perspective. It's drawing letters and drawing a city. There's, I think, 3 videos total. The cityscape comes in 2 parts. And then if you want to learn more about 3 point perspective, just start doing it. All right, and you can look up information about this and I love to draw in 3-point perspective. It's one of my favorite ways to draw because it makes things just feel a little more dynamic, because you almost never have anything that's totally straight up and down like this line right here. All right, so that is our review and I guess possibly introduction of new material as far as the technique that we're going to use to create a pretty complicated drawing. So that is the end of this short demo, and we'll go ahead and move on with our 2-point perspective drawing now.